I've never used one of these before, but it sounds like it's working. First of all, thank you to Principal Reyes, Ms. Husband, the class of 2015. This is really neat. I've been in this community now for the last 8 years. So I've driven by here probably, I was thinking about it, at least 1,000 times. I've driven by up and down. I've used this post office many times. I mean, I'm very familiar with this neighborhood, and I've always admired, as I've driven by, like, oh, that's a beautiful building. And then over the years, I've never been in here, and over the years, some of the Elvira students had come here, and they were always incredible kids. So I've always had really positive thoughts, and then now that I'm getting to participate in this, it's just really adding to the impressive thoughts that I have about this school. So thank you very much for having me. When I was first invited, I started thinking about, you know, what am I going to talk about, how am I going to appeal to some of these kids, because I'm used to elementary students. You know, I did a little research on what makes the TEDx talk, and one of the first things I saw is you need to be an expert, and I'm looking at that, and then I read a little further and it said, well, not the world's foremost expert, but you need to be an expert. And then I thought, well, gosh, they might have the wrong guy here. You know, I can talk about, you know, maybe student engagement. Boy, I can really get, you know, 30 kids in an elementary setting to focus. But I think I'm going to be looking at a different audience here today, so I'm not sure that I'm an expert on that. And I did a little research on that, and I found something interesting. If you see me looking closely, actually, I found that adults, and this is where I'm really going to get myself confused, because I thought adults are really good at looking at you and making you think that they're paying attention. So that's a trick that I've learned, and I know it's true because I am actually definitely one of those adults. I'll stare you right in the eye, and I am listening, I promise. But high school kids and middle school kids, I had a couple years at Challenger where I experienced the pain. I mean, I experienced the experience. They might not be looking at you at all, but they're listening. So that's pretty cool. So that's going to help me feel better. But anyway, as I learned more about the theme, I thought the road to an answer was awesome. And what I do know about, and I think all of us are experts on, is ourselves and kind of the path that we're on. The road to an answer to me is really intriguing because as we travel down that road, do we ever find the answer? You know, I think that maybe sometimes we do, and then maybe other times we realize, well, wow, that road's about to take a twist I didn't see, and who knows if I'm going to find the answer. So I added my own title, you know, Finding Your Passion and Fueling Your Fire. And I wanted to just share a little bit about my journey, which I think is definitely still in progress, the path that I'm on. And I've been very, very fortunate because as you'll see here, I've been lost on that road many, many times. And you know, sometimes some of you, I do see there's a diversity in the audience. I think it was Talking Heads, there's an 80s song, How Did I Get Here? And I'm always thinking about that whenever I hear this song. I'm like, wow, I just never imagined that all these things would happen. And then here again is one of those moments. How am I standing up here having such a unique experience? Well, this, and I think I'm breaking one of the TED rules here, so there's a lot there, but I wanted to make sure that I gave really due diligence to the quote. Steve Jobs did the late Steve Jobs, obviously all of you know, I'm sure, the genius behind Apple, did a commencement at Stanford in 2005, and as I did my homework, as every good educator would do to prepare for the talk, I watched a ton of the TEDx talks, and his actually came up on it. I don't know if it was an official TEDx talk, but it kind of qualified. So this to me was really interesting, and it ties in when we think about our journeys. You can't connect the dots looking forward, you can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something. Your gut, your destiny, life, karma, whatever. And I looked at that and I thought, I watched it a few times, and I thought, you know, I'm not sure that he was a man of faith, but I think a lot of us here are in the room, so we can kind of add our own extra part of that. And this approach has never let me down, and it's made all the difference in my life. And that to me is really profound. The more I looked at that, I thought that is absolutely so true. So I'm going to reference that a little bit as we move forward. So what you see here is some beautiful barber skills in the 1970s. It was pretty awesome. My parents didn't have to spend more than a dime for haircuts. They had a bowl and a scissors, and they gave us each a dime to sit still. That's my sister. She's 2 years older. And you know, as a kid growing up, you know, we all have different thoughts about what we're going to be and what we're going to do. And I can tell you that she knew, I'm not sure about this because I think this was probably at age 6, but within a few years of this, she was already working her way toward her passion, toward what she is now, a very successful attorney. And as a kid, I can tell you that I had a 0% success rate in all of the cases that she practiced on me. I probably am the world's most highest losing percentage attorney as a defendant. I mean, I got prosecuted and lost and lost and lost. She knew from very early on what she was going to do. And I can tell you firsthand through the experiences and the pain, she was very good at it. And me, on the other hand, and I think there's some people in here that probably fit into that category where you've maybe known from a very early age, you know, and that's a beautiful thing. I mean, I've always envied those people. Myself, my passions as a kid, sports, Nintendo, having fun with my friends, you know, and I truly did believe that I was going to be a professional athlete. And I look back on that and I think, you know, wow, my parents were so loving and supportive. They never pulled me aside and said, you know, hey, what's your backup plan? You know, like, what do you think? Because it's probably a 1 in a million, you know, I mean, realistically. Instead, it was support, encouragement, you know, cheering at the games. And I decided to really put all my eggs in one basket with that professional athlete dream. My dad's 6'4", so I thought, well, I'm going to get pretty tall, I'm going to focus on basketball. And I ended up going to South Point, and I was good enough to play, but I was 5'11" as a freshman. You know, and you can see I'm definitely aging myself here. We still had short shorts. And this was actually the early 90s. So I was good enough to play, but then by the time I got to be like a junior and senior, I just realized, wow, that's not happening. You know, where am I? What am I doing? You know, I mean, there's no college person here to watch me. I'm second or third off the bench on varsity. So all of a sudden, you know, I'm trying to connect dots and I don't have any to connect. You know, I'm kind of like moving forward. I mean, I had pretty good grades. So I went to the U of A. You know, I mean, for me, both my parents, I was really fortunate. It was just expected in my family. Both my parents had, you know, grad degrees. My sister was already in school, getting ready for law school. I went to the U of A, but I wasn't focused. You know, I didn't know. When I look back and you look at Steve Jobs' quote and I think about some of the dots, you know, again, you can see them perfectly in hindsight and they make sense. But in high school, I had already started working for KidCo, which is like a Tucson Parks and Rec program. During the summer, I worked at a couple TUSD schools on the south side and loved it. You know, I had fun with the kids. It was a great fit. You know, I loved running around up there playing with them, doing activities, but I just thought I was having fun. So I got to college and I started off with a psych major. I had no idea. It seemed like it might be a good plan, and then I realized, you know, living away from home down on campus, that if you decide that you're not going to get up on time for your 8 o'clock Psych 101 class, that's on you. You know, I mean, you don't have the parents there anymore doing that, and I was definitely one of those kids. I wasn't focused. I didn't have a purpose, and that's kind of a scary thing. So I was going through the first few years of school really unfocused. I changed my major a couple times. Again, looking back on some of the dots that were there, I was still doing KidCo as a part-time job in a couple of the Amphi schools, and I had gone out and done a summer camp for an entire summer out in Massachusetts. That was an experience. I had a cabin with 9 9-year-olds for 2 months, coached basketball every day, and really loved it. But I was just having fun. It didn't seem like any kind of career path for me at that point. And another experience when I look back and connect the dots of kind of how I got to where I'm at down here in the Elvira neighborhood is for my Spanish at the U of A, I had decided to go down to Guadalajara and do summer school down there for 2 summers. And it was really my first, I lived down there for 2 summers, you know, lived with the family, the kind of the immersion program. And it was beautiful. I loved the people. I mean, just some of the best people I've ever known in my life. And it was really my first experience getting to know people so much different than myself in a different country, different language, and it was beautiful. So I, after a few years, still didn't really know what I was going to do, and my mom had finally pulled me aside and she had said, you know, you're going to need to get a degree, you can't stay here forever. She was teaching at the U of A, so I kind of had a pretty nice deal with that, but I really was just kind of floating along. So finally I said, well, which classes do I like? And I decided on history. You know, if I'm going to get a degree, I might as well just enjoy going to these classes. So I got a history degree, finished up. I decided I probably needed to leave Tucson. I'd been around here for pretty much my whole life, for quite a long time. And as probably anyone would do that really didn't know what to do and hadn't really found their passion yet, decided to move to Vegas. Doesn't that seem like a great idea? So, yeah. Believe it or not, that's what seemed like a great choice for me at age 23. So I had a little Honda Accord and I packed it up with whatever I could fit in there and I moved to Vegas. And boy, was that a bad idea. I got a job. You know, I found a buddy up there who was from South Point that was working in sales. And, you know, he was a year older than me. We got an apartment and, you know, he hooked me up with a job where he was working in sales. I don't know, it was a job and I'd never had my own money before. I could tell you a lot about tile, about grout joints, about granite countertops, but I can tell you during those years I never got excited about it. There was no passion. The money was good, and that lasted me for a couple of years. You know, when you're first out of school and you really have never had your own money, I think that can carry you for a little ways. But for me, it lasted a couple of years, and kind of the excitement of living in Vegas wore off pretty fast. And what I was doing, and again, this is looking back and connecting the dots, is I was still coaching on the side. I'd done a lot of coaching in college as a volunteer, and I kept doing it up in Vegas. There's a little suburb there of Henderson. And I'll never forget, because it really is where I can pinpoint when I finally realized what I needed to do, is there was a little, it's probably 9 and 10-year-old baseball team, and we didn't even have a name. We were just the purple team. They divided us up by color. And it was really the Bad News Bears. Most of these kids had never played before. We were just having a great time. Everybody was trying different positions. You know, really just a fun team. And I realized one day out there in practice, this is the best time of my day. This is the best time of my week. This is what I need to be doing. You know, how can I make this my reality? You know, I mean, I was having these like nightmare daydreams of continuing on the path that I was, and waking up and being 50 or 60 years old and saying, what did I do besides make money? What did I do that I feel, you know, like I've really done something or I've had an impact? And you know, I'm a passionate person. I used to tell my kids when I was teaching, sometimes I have to stop and take pauses. You know, I had second grade for 1 year, and when I read Charlotte's Web, I had to take some pauses. So when I share some of these things, I mean, it really is a passion for me, and I was so fortunate. It was almost like an epiphany out there. I'll still remember those exact practices and games where I realized this is what I need to do. So I made the move. You know, it took me a lot. I'm a real loyal person. I felt bad about quitting my job, even though it wasn't anything I cared about. And I had kind of gotten to what, to me, I still stick with, and I think some of you might be familiar with. I call this the shower test. And for me, and some of you maybe are people that shower and clean up at night, but for me, every morning when you're getting ready for your day, you're in the shower, and as a teacher, I used to make some of the best lesson plans ever while I was in that shower, getting ready for the day. And I shouldn't say this in front of Mrs. Palmer, because I'm sure, you know, she probably thinks she has to have them all planned out days and weeks in advance. But I'd be in there thinking of the greatest plans, you know, the morning of, and all these great thoughts. Well, in Vegas, I was in the shower every morning thinking, I don't want to go to work. Like, I'm not excited about this day. You know, it was dread. You know, it was just like, what am I doing? You know, I'm not excited about this. So that to me was a shower test, and I wanted to get away from that. I wanted to wake up every day and be excited what I was doing. So I made the move back to Tucson, and, you know, I got to follow with the TEDx rules. To kind of fast forward, you know, a lot of different things led into getting down here to Elvira. I spent a couple years in TUSD at a school on the west side, really just kind of getting in there and learning and deciding where I really wanted to be. I mean, loved the elementary level. And one summer I got a call from a teacher who was teaching 5th grade at Elvira. And I'd never talked to her before in my life. And she said, you know, she introduced herself, and I said, you know, hi. And she said, well, you know, my sister is the health clerk up there where you're teaching at Bricked Elementary. And, you know, she said, maybe give you a call, maybe you would be interested. And I said, wow, that's really interesting, you know, that your school hires that way. You know, that's really unique. You know, I'd never imagined that could happen. So, you know, of course, I got connected to the principal and came down to Elvira, and I've been down here ever since. And it's a beautiful thing. I mean, when I realized that working with kids and teaching kids, it sounds cliche, but I mean, there's a lot of educators in this room, you know it's true. You have a passion for having the ability to make a difference. You know, I mean, that's so exciting that you every day, whether it be a comment, a compliment, you know, we all know when we look back at those people in our lives, people we remember that maybe pulled us aside one day and said something to us that really was helpful or really was beautiful, or maybe we really needed some encouragement at a certain point. I can look back and I can identify those people, and as educators, we have that, you know, and that's one of the most powerful, beautiful things. So, you know, I definitely found my passion, and I'll move quickly here because, boy, these kids are the stars of the show. But one thing I learned, and just to share a few, you know, real specific passions on how I keep my fire fueled these days, is right after I got to Elvira, it was 1 year after I'd been there, my principal asked me if I could host a U of A student for a couple days a week. He was getting into his program, and his name was Philip, and I had gone to Elvira and just thought, you know, this is how things are, you know, everything, this is how it is, you know, whether it be the way things were done or the way things looked. I didn't have the ability at that point to look at things differently and say, well, why is it this way? Could it be better? And this kid, Philip, comes down, and he loves sports, and we go out to the basketball court. I was coaching all the teams, and he looks up, and we had 6 hoops. I'm sure a lot of you have driven by and you've seen the court. And at that time, this was like 8 years ago, 4 of the hoops were like somewhat in decent condition, and 2 of them didn't even have rims on them. And he just was like, I'll never forget, he was looking at them, and he's like, how come these, aren't nice? And, for me, I was just like, well, that's just how it is. And it was so, it was this huge, big thing for me as I kind of stepped back, and I was like, he's right. Like, why don't we have everything in the condition these kids deserve? And he was in a fraternity, and he goes, and a week later he comes with like $300 in donations he had gotten from different guys in his fraternity house. All of a sudden we bought these new rims and we got them put on, and from that point forward, my view was always different. We can't accept things for how they are, no matter where the school is. These kids, maybe in my opinion, more than any kid in any part of the city, kids that maybe haven't come from a lot, they deserve the very best. And that's something that's driven me every day since. I think about it all the time. And, I owe it to him, and you think about people on our path. And of course, if you're an educator, you think about what fuels your fire and what inspires you. I mean, if it's not the kids, then I think you're making a mistake, because it's definitely not the money, but it's all about the kids. And, you can see here a wonderful group of our kids. I'm inspired every day. Some of these kids, they've come from some amazing circumstances, and they're there every day. And this is another thing that I get really fired up about a lot of different things. But this one I used to think about as a teacher. Some of you might know the poem on the Statue of Liberty. It's an Emma Lazarus poem, and it's a little bit dramatic, but the more I was in education, I realized some of the difficult things that these kids came from. I thought to myself, this is true. Like, my classroom is a safe haven. My classroom, when they come into my room, they're here, and all the excuses are out the window. It doesn't matter. It does matter. I do care. But when they're here, I can teach them. I can give them every chance to be everything that every kid in other parts of the city get. And I used to really look at it that way, and I still do now, kind of on a school-wide basis. Now, this is kind of a weird one, because you're like, this guy's got a passion for Abraham Lincoln. Well, I love history. I did get the degree, and I truly do love it. And the passion that I have in this regard is just the leadership. The more I learned about Lincoln and just a lot of different historical figures, truly one of the kindest, most forgiving people you could ever imagine existed. I mean, really just an incredible, you don't get your face on money for no reason. So this person, well, hold on now, I can't be controversial to TEDx. Andrew Jackson, absolutely no idea why he's still on the money, but Abraham Lincoln, to me, is just incredible, an incredible inspiration. That fuels my fire, just the things that I want to be as a leader as I have the chance to have more experience. And then last but not least, Mrs. Plummer has seen this. This one really gets me going, and I actually have a printed copy of this that I keep at home every day in an area of my room where I'm always at, and I always see it. And this is a map of the Arizona Learns, and I could really go on forever when it comes to some of the details about Arizona and our public schools. And this right here is a map of Tucson, and I don't know how well, hopefully you can see it. I guess my clicker's not going to do any good when I'm pointing at this screen, but when you look at the top part of it, you basically have the foothills, and what you see is a lot of, it looks like they're kind of like green A's, and that's the score that schools get, public schools get scores. I don't have time to go off on my opinions about that. I'm very passionate about it. But then you can see where the interstates come through. You can see I-10, you can see I-19. You can see a lot of the A scores really are up there in the foothills. And you can see Midtown, you've got some B's and you got some C's. And then when you come down there to the interstates, you've got a lot of C's, a lot of D's. And then you can, of course, go down east to Vail, a lot of A's. And when we look at this, and when I look at this, I think there's a tendency to say, we can think about the SES of these parts of the city. We can think about the opportunities that kids have, but that's not how I choose to look at it. I choose to look, and again, my laser doesn't do me much good, but I choose to look down there in the areas that do have a lot of C's and D's, and guess what? There's A's and B's mixed in. And how is it that they have the A's and B's when they're coming from the same circumstances in the same areas? There's no excuses. Excuses are out the window, and for me, I'm very, very motivated, not just for Elvira, but in general, for any kids to deserve the same opportunity that the kids in the foothills get. So that's a driving force for me. I mean, my fire's lit on that all the time. In closing, as a lot of you are here as students and young adults, as you move forward on your path, I think this is something that you already know. But I can tell you the journey is a lot more fun if you find a passion. You know, wandering, which I've definitely done on some random roads that you're not sure where they're leading. It's not the best. You know, you might learn some lessons from it, but once you find that passion, it's a lot more fun. So thank you very much for having me.